very much and welcome to this session of enlightening and informing the world, especially with regards to 30th May. We want to start by saying that 30th May is a very significant and indelible date in the mind of every Biafran because it symbolizes the establishment of the true identity of Biafranism. Now, when we are talking about Biafranism, or when we are talking about Biafra and the Biafrans, we must know that there is something that is very unique about Biafrans, which the world tend to have come face to face with, and they probably are frightened by it. And it's as a result of this frightening that is inherent in the minds of the international community, and by extension, the local community, that has made every effort to be geared towards stifling or truncating or subverting the materialization or the realization of the nation of Biafra. Take, for example, when Britain first encountered us and they saw our civilization, they saw our technology, they saw our puritanism, that is the cleanliness of our society, they were marveled, they were frightened, they were held in consternation. And that was why they sat down and thought that with time, the people that could have advanced so much to the point that even in what could have been considered as their primitivity, there was no armed robbery, there was no prostitution, there was no poor person, there was not anything that defiled the society. And that was why they regarded us and described us as the great Igbo nation. The British, the early British that encountered us, described us as the great Igbo nation. You will also not forget that after the slave trade era, where Britain originally discovered our potentials and our capabilities, they graduated to colonial era. And now, for them to succeed in their colonialism, they levied war against the African continent. In various groups, in various nationalities, it was almost a walkover for the British to overcome those indigenous nationalities. Take Nigeria, for example, where they later brought what they called amalgamation. When they met the Westerners who are at present the western part of Nigeria, it's on record that it took them 9 months to conquer and subjugate and then overrun the West. It also took them 9 months to overcome the North. But when they came to the East, the world knows, Britain has it in their records, that they fought with the East, the Igbos, the Biafrans, for 31 years. And so they had that at the back of their mind as a debt that Biafrans must pay on a certain day. And that was why, from thenceforth, everything Britain did was to ensure that we were brought into captivity and possibly extinction. Take 1929, for example, where our mothers first resisted the British colonialism. It was a protest, but for the British people to paint us black and present us as people that were out of order to the world, they called it riots. The ABBA 1929 protest, Britain rechristened it as riot in order to make us to be seen as barbarians and savages. So, but they took that opportunity to kill many of our mothers in order to intimidate and silence us, so as not to continue the pursuit of freedom that we were already determined to pursue. The world knows that we are the origin, the Biafrans are the origin of what is called democracy today. because it is inherent in us, it is inborn in us. At every level of our society, you will see democracy in practice. So it is that democracy that is inborn in us that reflects in our republicanism. That is why every Biafran is a Republican. By that, you know that I mean, that democratic principles are part of our existence. So, going aside from 1929, now the British came also in 1943 to wipe out those that were demanding for their rights at Enugu coal camp. Why we are making all these references is to tell you that everything about democracy is identical and synonymous with the Biafrans. And that is why at every stage of our life, at every generation, at every point in time, we are basically concerned with democracy and its principles. So after 1943, we came down to 1949, where they massacred our people in 1953, where they massacred our people in Jos for making a legitimate demand. Now, all these things are as a result of the fact that Britain is bearing some animosity against us, against Biafrans. And that was why they took every opportunity to incite other people or to exercise brutality against us, so that we would be intimidated, we would be unnecessarily silenced, we would be frightened out of our rights. But has it worked? It has never worked, and it can never work. Now, what am I telling you? When there was a demand for independence in the National House of Assembly, Britain went back and incited the Northerners to begin to destroy the properties and the lives of the Biafrans for demanding independence, for demanding freedom. So it was not actually that the Northerners themselves didn't want freedom, but it was because Britain found them as easy tools for the execution of their cutting of pound of flesh against Biafrans. And that was why at every turn they would use their BBC to incite them, to inspire them, to ignite their riotousness against Biafrans. And that was why it was easy for them to be inflamed to go against Biafrans at every turn. No wonder that in the British manipulation and scheming, they deliberately reduced the Biafran nation, both in size and in population, at every turn. Have you asked yourself, have you wondered why in the then 3 regions of Nigeria, you had Biafrans, or Igbos as the British would like to have it, in the western region? You had Biafrans in the northern region, and then very little population of Biafrans in the eastern region. But before then, even the east had already been balkanized, cutting a large chunk of it and giving away to Cameroon as the present-day Ambazonia. If any person is in doubt of this assertion, let the person ask himself or herself why there was the party that was called NCNC, National Council of Nigerian Cameroons. It was because of the fact that Ambazonia, which was a part of the Cameroon, German Cameroon, that was later ceded to Britain at the loss of the war the Second World War to the world. Now it was taken from Cameroon and given to Britain. That was why the British organized the shambolic plebiscite that they used as an excuse to cut the Ambazonian part away to Cameroon. And then the northern part of the same Cameroon they gave to Nigeria in order to boost the population and the size of the north. Now, coming back from there, they cut a part of the east and gave to a part of Biafra land and gave to the western region, calling them, which was later carved out as Midwest. So now, the part that they gave to the north remains as part of the north up to this day. I'm very happy that if you had listened to our leaders' interactive session on Friday, you would have heard somebody that called from Kogi that said that his name is Okoro and that he's an Igbo person, but he is being described as a Northerner. but God forbids that he should be described and identified as a northerner. What am I saying here? Britain from time programmed to cut the size of the Biafrans both numerically and geographically. And that was why they started the balkanization long ago, in order to advance their divide and rule methodology. So what we are therefore saying in essence is that Britain had always had their eyes to ensure that Biafra has to be reduced to the minimal, both geographically and numerically. And no wonder, even in the place they left as Biafra, as Eastern region, they still went behind to plant internal squabble, internal enmity, by establishing what they call the Willings Commission. This Willings Commission, which Britain established in the East in order to advance their divide and rule strategy and to plant internal enmity amongst brethren. That was why they went to the coastal regions of Biafra and told them that they were minorities and that they were in danger in the hands of the Igbos. And because of that danger, they, Britain, that came from thousands of kilometers away, are prepared to save them from their brothers that are just living a few steps away. And now they went and planted that enmity through the Willings Commission by calling people that had been existing for thousands of years minorities. And by that identification, they began to plant the consciousness of enmity, plant the consciousness of distancing oneself from his brother. Of course, you know that by the time you are distanced from your brother, you are alone. And by the time you are alone, you become very vulnerable. And when you are very vulnerable, you become helpless and easy prey. That was exactly what Britain did in the East after having cut off so many parts. And now they told the coastal region people that they are minorities. And being minorities, they cannot join forces with their brothers in the upland part to fight against the British as common enemies. When I am talking about Britain as being the common enemy, don't look at any other nationality in Nigeria, because Britain is the mask that is being worn, or that is wearing the man behind the mask that is being presented as other minorities, be it Hausa, be it Fulani, be it Yoruba. We don't have any problem with any of those people. It is only Britain that is hiding behind them to cause the havoc. And so after having done this all the years, they continued to instigate, to propagate, to sustain even this lie through the media. They used the benefit of their monopolistic BBC as at that time to walk through the local media to instigate and instill this lie into the people that had already been filled with envy about our blessings by God. And so that was why when Enahoro moved for independence, then Britain began to tell the other parts of the country that this movement for freedom was being done so that Igbos could dominate them. And that was what inflamed their fear and their envy that was ignited and demonstrated as the riotous massacre of Biafrans during that time. So, after that phase was over, we now approached 1960, when what was declared as independence was given. May I tell you that even at that time of independence, Britain did all it could to ensure that Azikiwe, whom they had found out to be megalomaniac, Azikiwe had his eyes on a vast empire that he would rule. And Britain took advantage of that to continue to bring so many confusions and so many suggestions, which he, Azikiwe, compromised in order to be granted the emperorship of the vast empire. Can you imagine that when it was suggested to Azikiwe that the people that are incompatible with us, the other parts of Nigeria that are quite incompatible with us, being that they have very different and conflicting worldviews with us, that they should be allowed to go. That was why Awolowo suggested the secession clause in the Constitution. But Zik, being mindful of the vastness of the empire that he was targeting to rule, maybe with a camouflage of the assurance that his kinsmen, Igbo kinsmen, would always survive irrespective of however things are. And now with that, he had his eyes on this vast empire. And that was why he insisted, after Britain had actually wired him, after Britain had actually pumped him, after Britain had actually deceived him into believing that the secession clause will be to their own disadvantage, not knowing that it was for the advantage of Britain, so that they would always hide behind their mask to exploit even the southern part of the country. So for this secession clause was not included, and that was how Britain gained the first round. Because if the North, as they had originally planned and wanted and desired, had gone their way, there would not have been any need for any person to be under genocidal attack of any degree. But because Britain had convinced Zik that it was better to stay together, and so that he would propagate and advocate oneness to eternity, that was what misled Azikiwe, but he didn't know that he was just a tool in the hands of his own enemies. What I was saying, at the granting of independence in 1960, now the regions were on their own, almost completely autonomous. And that was when the world saw the miracle of Biafrans. Do not forget that the Biafra's economy was growing at 40% per annum. It was a miracle. There was no other economy that was growing at that rate in the world. And this thing wasn't going down with Britain very well. And that was why they sought all means to what? To truncate, to stifle, to extinguish that flaming fire of rapid economic development in the eastern region. What did they do? They planted chaos in Nigeria. They planted chaos. And that was why the West was on fire. And now the North, which was basically the Fulani, who Britain had been doing everything to ensure that they remained in control, knowing their gullibility, so that they would always be instruments in granting Britain access to wherever they wanted as the people that are in charge of federal government. So Britain was ensuring that everything about Fulani was topmost. Did I tell you that it was for the purpose of establishing and planting Fulani as their stooges that Britain rigged everything? They rigged the population, they rigged the election, they rigged the geographical boundaries, and they rigged everything. When I'm saying that they rigged the geographical boundaries, remember that I said that some part of Biafra was caught and given to the North. As we are talking, part of Biafra is in Kogi, part of Biafra is in Benue. When I'm talking about Biafra, I don't just mean Igbo, but Igbo is inclusive. There is Igbo land in Kogi. There are also people that are not Igbos per se, which is a Gala that is in Kogi. These were all people, these were all in the former Eastern region. Likewise, a Gala. Likewise, Igede in Benue. They are all part of Biafra, which Britain caught and gave to the North in order to make the North humongously large. And then to reduce the size of Biafra to a minimal dot. That is why some people in some quarters, even up to this day, they still refer to Igbo land as a dot on the map. But it's a misconception and it's a misbelief. I mean, it's a misinformation and it's a misleadership. So what am I saying? When they planted that anarchy in the West, they wanted to use it to silence the West, and they imposed their puppets on the West. And not just to impose their puppet, but to advance their expansionism, which was the Fulani Jihad. Now, what did they plan to do? They planned to execute simultaneous jihad in the Middle Belt and in the Western region. And that was the information that got to the Chief Intelligence Officer of the Nigerian Army, Chukwuma Nzorgu. And now, while Chukwuma was contemplating that information, Britain planned the coup. They drew the roadmap They drew the blueprint of the coup that was called the Nzogu coup, but the target of Britain was to use it as a cover to invade the East and then commit their long-planned genocide as a means of cutting their pound of flesh against the Biafrans, who Britain likes to refer to as the Igbos. Of course, we are all Igbos, starting from the lower Niger, lower Benue, that is in Igala and the Igala, Idoma, down to the coast, including the extremists up to Bakassi. In fact, including the Ambazonians. So, when they planned to execute this genocide by reason of finding an excuse, they found Nzogu to be a ready tool. But they didn't present the matter as a means of doing any other thing against the Biafrans. They presented it in such a way that it appeared that Nzogu was revolutionizing governance so as to make things look what it should be. Having known the diligence and commitment and the achievements of Awolowo, they presented a package whereby after the revolution, Awolowo, who was determined to establish a clean society, progressive society, will be made the prime minister. They didn't know that it was just a ploy. What are we saying? When Nzogu got hold of that information, got hold of that plan, he went ahead thinking that the plans were as he was told. That was why he led his fellow compatriots to go to execute that revolution, which many people like to call a coup, which was even not as successful as he had intended. In fact, it wasn't successful. Because why I want to make this point is that many people would want to tell you that Nzogu coup was Igbo coup. But they wouldn't mention that that same Nzogu coup was foiled by two prominent Igbo men. One at Lagos, Aguiyi Ironsi, another at Kano, Odumegwu Ojukwu. These were the two people and incidental Igbo men that sought to eat that Nzogu coup did not succeed. But that notwithstanding, Britain, having gotten what they wanted, because of the fact that Ahmadu Bello had been assassinated with a number of officers, went to town with the story that it was Igbo coup, that he was eliminated the leaders of others so as to take over Nigeria completely. But may I remind the world that even before that coup, Igbo was in control of every facet of activity in Nigeria. Be it governance, be it commerce, be it military, everything about Nigeria, academics, education. It was Igbo that was in the commanding heights of every strata of that economy and then governance. So any person that is telling you that Igbo organized the coup to dominate Nigeria, first of all, it was not an Igbo coup because every section of Nigeria was involved. Meanwhile, it was Igbo that truncated that coup. It was Ojukwu in Kano and Aguiyi Ironsi in Lagos. Having gone through that stage, Britain, by reason of their exclusive monopolistic inclinations in their BBC megaphone, which I have always referred to as the devil's mouthpiece, went to town to tell others that it was Igbo coup, that it was Igbo coup. Don't forget that even at the time that coup was executed, the whole country spontaneously rose in jubilation because by the presentation that Nzogu made and by the package that they presented, everybody saw that they were prepared to build a united Nigeria where everybody will be progressive. But because of Britain's hidden agenda, they used the benefit of their media, which was BBC, to incite the rest of Nigerians against the domineering tendencies and the pursuit of the Igbos. No wonder, within a very short time, what was seen as a celebration, what was seen as a cause for celebration was now being looked at with skepticism. And so, before long, the people that were jubilating that there was a revolution were now becoming skeptical. They were now becoming cold. They were now becoming withdrawn because of the fact that they had been told that Igbo carried out the coup in order to dominate them. Remember that I said that the agenda behind the whole process or the whole program was that Britain was looking for a way of cutting their pound of flesh. One of the pounds of flesh that Britain wanted to cut was that as our economy was growing at 40% per annum, it was a threat to them. It was something that they didn't find acceptable. It was something that they found hard to swallow. And so they were looking for a way of ensuring that that rapid growth was extinguished. And that they achieved by using Nsogbu to carry out that coup and then capitalizing on that coup to come to incite the rest of the country against Biafrans. Again, because of the fact that it was Biafrans that stood at the forefront of pursuing British away from Nigeria, thereby forcing them to grant what they call that independence. They never forgave Biafrans up to this moment because they felt that Biafrans took away their food from their mouth. And that was why they had been keeping that malice against Biafrans, apart from the other accumulated reasons for which they have been targeting Biafrans as victims of a genocidal extermination. These immediate ones, more or less, prompted them to take immediate action. So, when the coup failed, they used it to get into what they had targeted. Now, in the process of the coup failing, Nigeria was in anarchy. That was after they had killed Irunsi. And so the government house was without any governor, that is no president, no head of state. Even when Gowon pronounced himself as head of state, it was not acceptable to everyone because first of all, it was known that it was Ogundipe, who was the senior most in rank, that should take over. But because of the British at the agenda, they frightened Ogundipe. Ogundipe fled to London. Even at that, it was not Gowon that was next in command. And that was why it was not acceptable to many of the officers. And that brought the nation to a state of incoherence. That is something that was not completely settled. And so it was like that. And that killings of Igbos as a result of the failed coup continued in the north. And after Ojukwu's discussion, Ojukwu was the governor of the Eastern region. After his discussion with Gowon, who was the chief of army staff, but had pronounced himself the head of state. After his discussion that there should be a truce, that the peace should be maintained, and a number of things done so that the killings should stop. There was nothing like that that was effected in the north. Gowon was more or less supporting and aiding and inciting the northerners to continue with the killing of Biafrans. And when this continued, now the country was degenerating and degenerating rapidly. That was why there was the need for a truce to be reached. This led to the Aburi Conference. A number of things which I don't have time to recall here were agreed at Aburi so that by their implementation there would be peace in the country and that each region would continue to grow, to develop itself, to operate on its own with a loose center. And that was what would have set Nigeria up on the path of progress that would have made Dubai and even China and all the Asian tigers not to see the back of Nigeria. But because of the British selfish interest, which was fixated on Biafra's oil and gas, they were doing everything to ensure that the East was never on its own. Because they knew that we would develop rapidly. The oil and gas that they have been stealing parasitically will be properly negotiated. And now, the ingenuity of the people would have room to be exercised. Britain never wanted it that way. And that was why they went and told Gowon not to accept nor implement the Aburi Accord. So, after Ojukwu and the Gowon had agreed that Aburi's agreement should be announced and implemented, when they came back here, Gowon remained mute, having been instructed, having been commanded by Britain not to accept nor announce. You find out that with that, no announcement was made. Even when, after a number of months that Ojukwu waited for him to make the announcement and then make the declaration and start implementation, nothing was coming from him. That was why Ojukwu published the agreement. And now Gowon began to say that Ojukwu went to publish the agreement before him. Why should he publish? He should have waited for him. But this has gone into months. And people were being killed. And so when Ojukwu published the Aburi Accord, and then Gowon was actually Britain was enraged, which was expressed through Gowon. Now they began to say things that are incoherent, and then began to say do a number of things. So it was the intensification of the killings of Biafrans in the north that led Ojukwu to consult the Eastern Consultative Assembly that mandated him to declare this nation of Biafra, so that we would have a grounds upon which to stand to defend ourselves. Because since Nigeria had failed and was actually propagating and then accentuating, giving more force to the killing of Biafrans, it was very clear that we could not be protected inside Nigeria. And so our Eastern Region Governor, Ojukwu, was mandated by the generality of the people and the General Assembly to declare the state of Biafra, so that we will stand as an independent nation to defend ourselves. And that was why Biafra was declared. But then Britain had actually projected that this chaos, this anarchy they were planting, would give them a leverage, would give them an opportunity, would give them a window to come to Biafra land and then to massacre them and then to bring them to extermination and possibly extinction. And that was why the British High Commissioner in Nigeria, as at that time, Sir David Hunt, went about telling all the Northerners about the determination of Biafrans to overrun them, to overtake them, then to dominate them, and then to swallow them up. And that was why, after the declaration of Biafra, every other part of Nigeria, wherein Biafrans were being killed even before then, began now to see the reason to throw their hearts into the ring and then to commence the full-fledged massacre of Biafrans. And that was what was called the Civil War. But you know that what was called that Civil War was not actually any civil war. It was the genocidal war levied against Biafrans by Britain, using Nigeria as a cover. So when Biafra was declared, Britain found the opportunity it had sought over the years. And that was why, even though it was agreed that there should not be any external interference in the internal internecine war within Nigeria, Britain went and arranged with Russia, USSR, to supply to them very heavy weaponry with which they came into Biafra land. I will tell you what they did with it. Not only that they met with the Russians, they also met with the Arab world. Not only that they met with the Arab world, they also met with the Organization of African Unity, which was the rest of the African continent. And all these people were those that joined forces to queue behind Britain with a number of other international parasites that call themselves developed countries. So all these other developed countries, who I call international parasites, queued behind Britain together with the Islamic world, and then, or Arab world, and then African continent as a whole. They all queued behind Britain to fight against Biafra, using Nigeria as a cover. So if any person tells you that there was any civil war in Nigeria, tell the person that it's a lie, because there was no civil war. What we had was the genocidal war, in which Biafrans were massacred up to the tune of 6 million. What was the means of exterminating? What was the means of murdering Biafrans? Britain, with all those heavy weapons, came into Biafra, bombing churches, bombing markets, schools, hospitals, refugee camps, and the residential homes, telling you that they never meant to spare any single soul. And so they wanted to wipe out everything that was identified as Igbo. And that was why, by the time they advanced their massacre, the people that they overran, they compelled them to deny their Igbo-ness. They compelled them, they forced them to jettison, deny, disassociate themselves from being described as Igbos. So when you see, after they had done that, and they continued the massacre through land, sea, and air blockade, which was what accounted mostly for the starvation that killed majority of Biafrans at that time. Apart from the air bombardment by Russia, which Britain was bringing and supplying to Nigeria, there was also the land, sea, and air blockade, which made it impossible for Biafrans to communicate with any outsider. So all that we used to resist the genocide for the nearly 3 years it lasted were things that we produced by ourselves. And this was part of what even marvels Britain up to this day. But what are we saying? I said that all those weapons that the Russians supplied them were used on defenseless and unprotected and innocent and civilian Biafrans, because they were bombing residential houses, they were bombing markets, they were bombing churches, they were bombing hospitals, they were bombing schools, and the worst of all, refugee camps. Those that had fled from their home. Refugee camps is what is called in the present day IDP camps, internally displaced persons. So when we're talking about refugee camps, understand that it is that same refugee camp that they renamed, because our leader told them that all that Biafrans suffered, they will suffer in many folds. So they don't want to call it the same refugee camps, which they also are bombing by themselves, even as we are talking. So the refugee camps are internally displaced persons camps. So Britain was also bombing this, using the Egyptian pilots that they had hired as mercenaries to come and conscientiously bomb everywhere. And so they did. Now, what are we saying? While this was going on, Britain was busy using the BBC, telling the world that there was no war, that it was just a riot, it was an internal disagreement, that it was being brought under control. And there was no way the world could ascertain, because it was only BBC that was the reliable media. And so BBC, that was Britain, was the one that was committing the genocide, and they were the one feeding the world with the reports. So what do you expect? Of course, it will be painted in flowing colors and in glowing colors in the favor of Britain. And so that was how Britain used Nigeria to commit that genocide that cost Biafrans over 6 million souls. And so when the genocide was suspended, by suspension, I mean when they said that the civil war had ended, first of all, there was no civil war, and it never ended. It was only suspended temporarily. And you can be very sure, any person that is watching me now must, if you cast your mind on the events of, or sequence of events that have taken place recently, you will know that the genocide had a long recommenced. And that is why the whole place is at its seat. So we are saying that when Britain had succeeded in massacring, murdering, and then exterminating Biafrans to the tune of 6 million people, using Nigeria as a cover, when our resistance was getting to their neck, they began to lobby. They began to lobby that we would call for truce, that we would call for a ceasefire. It never dawned on us that it was them that we are exhausted. Otherwise, we would have continued and continued. That was when the world would have intervened to resolve the matter in our favor. But unfortunately, because we had no means of communication with the outside world, because we had no means of communication even within ourselves, this fact escaped us. And so we once again fell into the British trap of calling for the truce, which they called surrendering. But they themselves acknowledged, I mean Nigeria, that Britain was working with, acknowledged the fact that there was no victor and there was no vanquished. But this was just a mere oral expression, because the war has not even ended, not to talk of having a victor or a vanquished. And so everything that they said, they went exactly opposite every one of them. So when they suspended the genocidal war, which they called the Civil War, the result was that a great percentage of the population of Biafrans had gone. Some died through starvation as a result of the blockade, land, sea, and air. Some died in the war front, some died in their homes, some died in the refugee camps, some died in the hospitals and schools, where the continuous bombardment by the Egyptian pilots with Russia's MiG was ceaseless. And so dead bodies of Biafrans littered everywhere. At a time, there were no more burials, because while gathering to bury, there will be a bombardment that will wipe out all the people that gather for burial. So when they suspended that genocidal war for that time, Britain, in their cleverness, confiscated the Biafran oil and gas wealth, which was their primary reason for going into that genocidal war. They confiscated the Biafran's oil and gas, which has been a mainstay, the backbone of British economy up to this day. That is why Britain always tends to run mad whenever they hear the name Biafra. That is why they tend to run mad whenever they hear about the division of Nigeria. Why have you not asked yourself that that Britain, that is a protagonist, that is a champion of democracy, quietly, peacefully, and in consensus, left the EU through the British Brexit referendum? Britain did that. And so, even before now, they had organized the Scottish referendum, which would determine whether Scotland will stay or not. Now you ask yourself, Europe is homogeneous in terms of value system. They're homogeneous in religion. They are also homogeneous in governance practice, which is democracy. Why is Britain leaving the EU? Now, this same Britain that left EU, where there is compatibility in almost every facet, where there is uniformity in almost everything, Britain left that EU and they came here to insist that Nigeria, where there are conflicting, opposing, and in fact, views that are at war with one another, that they must remain together. Unfortunately and painfully, even the US, that is the beacon of democracy, through their representative here in the US embassy, which is the US and Nigeria, Mary Beth Leonard, is the very person that is advocating and promoting multiculturalism in Nigeria. Multiculturalism means the unification of opposing and divergent views and religions in order to form uniformity. How can oil and water mix and they become a perfect blend? Even as Lugard stipulated in his handover notes, that Nigeria, southern part of Nigeria and northern part of Nigeria are like oil and water, which can never mix, which can never blend. Now, US of all people is telling the world that multiculturalism should be promoted in Nigeria so that they can coexist harmoniously. How can Afghanistan, Pakistan, United States, Saudi Arabia, Britain, and America be made to be one country? is an impossibility. Any person that is making such a pronouncement, any person that is making such a proposal is worse than a vampire, because he knows, she knows that there is no way two opposing views that are at parallel lines can ever meet. And that is why it is very disgusting and painful that even the United States ambassador can be a party to such an absurdity. So, coming back to the confiscation of Biafra's oil and wealth by Britain at the end of the genocidal war, we said that that same reason, that same act is the very reason why Britain has been doing everything to ensure that their puppets, the Fulani, who they have always used as their front to bring devastation to the land of Biafra, to bring stagnation to the land of Biafra, to bring retrogression to the land of Biafra, that they remain in power. That is why they have been doing almost the impossible to ensure that the Fulani remains in power. And so, from the beginning of 1970, Britain had been putting in place policies. Of course, when they are putting up policies, they're not putting it up as Britain, they're putting it up as Nigerian government. But any person that is sane, any person that is alive, any person that is truthful knows that from the beginning, whatever governance that you see in Nigeria is just a representation of the British government. So when we say that Britain has been using or putting up policies to stagnate Biafra, understand that they are doing so through Nigerian government. And so, one of such policies you must remember is what they call the exclusive list. This is to show you the continuation of that war, because when they said that they suspended the war in 1970, they did not actually suspend it. They began to execute the war from other fronts, starting with what they call the 20 pounds policy. When the genocidal war ended, instead of rehabilitating the survivors, they went ahead to murder them, to commit another economic genocide against them. And this economic genocide was what was called the 20 pounds policy. What does it mean? The 20 pounds policy was the federal government policy of giving only 20 pounds to every surviving Biafran who could prove that he had any money in the bank. I mean, not just any Biafran that came forth, but any Biafran that could prove that he had any money with the meaningful documentation and proof that he had any money. No matter whatever the person had, whether it was 1,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds, 1 million, 100,000 pounds, 1 million pounds, 1 billion pounds, which many of us had, all you could be given was 20 pounds. And so that was part of the economic strangulation that Britain, through Nigeria, levied against the genocide survivors. Following that, quickly was the indigenization decree, by which the government enacted the policy that all the multinational companies should be indigenized, that is, should be sold, should be made public liability companies. You know that at that time, first of all, we had been taken away from commercial activities for about 3 years. In fact, over 3 years. Because this problem of the genocidal war that culminated, the problem that culminated in the genocidal war, which was suspended in 19... So for all that period, much of the activities of Biafrans were stifled, were stagnated, were demobilized. And so by the time they were enacting the indigenization decree in about 1973 or 72, many of us could hardly feed themselves. And so this tells you automatically that we had no money. And so when they indigenized those companies, now they sold them off to all the people that could buy. That was why you see many of the blue chip companies that they were owned by other Nigerians except Biafrans. Meanwhile, some of them were giving loans with our money that was confiscated for them to buy those companies. But because God has always been on our side, many of those companies are dead even up as we are talking. Many of the meaningful companies that are alive are those that are established by the survivors of the genocide. And so when they finished that indigenization decree, whereby we were ostensibly excluded from the economic ownership of economic capitals. They advanced the economic genocide further against the genocide survivors by promoting what they called abandoned property. What is abandoned property? They wanted to ensure that the enmity between brethren and brethren was critically advanced, that made them to go to the coastal regions of Biafra and told them that these properties, first of all, you that is Okeke, remember that from now on that you are no more Igbo. You that is Nwankwo, remember that you are no more Igbo. You that is Amechi, you are no longer Igbo. In fact, it is better for you to change your name to Rotimi so that it will be very clear that you don't have anything to do with Igbo. This was what they told people like Tam David West, who was originally Uswago. And then they changed their names. Many of them that are answering Clark, many of them that are answering white, black, brown. All of them are Biafrans. They are all Igbos. But because the government went and told them to change their names so that it will be very clear that they are no longer Igbos. Now, on doing that, they were compensated with the property of those that they were calling Igbos. But meanwhile, these were their brethren. So, to give them those properties, the condition or the conditionality that they had to meet for them to be awarded those properties was that they would deny their being Igbo. That is the very identification or identity crisis that many of our coastal brothers are still suffering from today. Because the guilt of their denial, the guilt of their betrayal, the guilt of their sabotage is still haunting them up to this very moment. And that is why you will see an Okonkwo, you will see a Shukuma, you will see Ogoshuku telling you that he is not Igbo. It is the haunting of their conscience, or by their conscience, about their betrayal of their kinsmen that is the malady that is being inflicted upon them, or that is afflicting them. What are we saying? We're talking about the advancement of the genocidal war. When they finished it in human genocide, they advanced it to economic genocide. And in their economic genocide, they implemented the 20 pounds policy. They implemented the indigenization decree. They implemented the abandoned property policy. That is why you will see somebody who is Okonkwo telling you that he's a Niger Delta. Why? What is he running away from? He's running away from the fact that he acceded to accepting his brother's property in order to live off it and then to deny his brother, not knowing that he is making himself vulnerable by separating himself and making himself to stand alone, so that he will be an easy prey to the outside enemy. And that is what has been happening to them. But we thank God for our leader, Mazen Nandekan, who has come to bring back sanity to the minds of all those people that have derailed. What are we saying in essence? Now, in the advancement of the economic genocide, they have been putting up every form of obnoxious and unscrupulous decree and policy in order to ensure that the Biafrans, who they prefer to call Igbos, are stifled, that they are made to stand at a point without progressing. That is why you hear of policies like the one that I mentioned before, exclusive list, where the road that leads to the Oka government house belongs to the federal government. And so even if there is developed, even if a gully, even if a valley, even if whatever is developing there, the state governor does not have the power to repair it, even though thousands of people are dying there. Either until he is permitted by Abuja to repair the road, or Abuja comes to repair it by themselves. The place will continue to consume the natives because it is on the exclusive list. That is why also the Niger Bridge that they have been deceiving themselves with year after year. Are you telling me that Anambra State government alone cannot construct a bridge over the River Niger? Are you telling me that Delta State government cannot construct a bridge over the River Niger? But because it's on an exclusive list, they do not have the authority to go to attempt any of such economic activities. It is part of the policy of stagnating or retrogressing the Biafra land. This same policy applies to roads. This same policy applies to electricity generation. Are you telling me that one individual cannot supply electricity that will be on constant basis to Anambra State, for example? Are you telling me that the coal that is in Enugu, that is in Kogi, that is also in Anambra, it cannot be accessed to generate electricity? Are you telling me that the gas that Nigeria is misappropriating and giving to neighboring countries, and that Britain is taking free of charge, and in most cases, flaring, burning it, in order to reach what they want to get? Are you telling me that somebody cannot utilize it and generate electricity that will supply light to Africa 100 years uninterruptedly? But these are all on exclusive list. Take, for example, the railway. There is no other person that has the power to construct the railway except the federal government. And now you can see that the federal government of Nigeria is constructing railways from Nigeria to Niger without taking into consideration all those areas from which the revenue for the economic activities of Nigeria or the life wire of Nigeria is coming from. They construct railways to Chad. They construct railways to Niger. They are begging Niger to bring railways to them. Whereas the people that need the railways, there's nothing for them. Or are you not amazed? Are you not held in consternation that where there is a concentration of travelers, the seaports, where there is a concentration of importers, where there is a concentration of those that are making use of the maritime industry, all the seaports are dead. They are redundant. They are moribund. None of them is functioning. Calabar, One, Iguacha, all these are non-functional. But Lagos here is congested because of what? Exclusive list. So these are policies that are deliberately designed and implemented in order to work against Biafrans so that their development will constantly be arrested. Now think of the airports. They tell you that airports also, international airport is on, in fact, airport general is on exclusive list. And that is why the whole of the East, where there is the highest concentration of travelers in the whole of African continent, there is no functional international airport there. Because the target is to ensure that the economic development of Biafrans is under constant arrest. And that is why you can see that every other place is functioning in tatters because of the fact that the things that are supposed to be done have not yet been done. Now, I'm telling you about the exclusive list. Have you heard about federal character? Have you heard about quota system? Have you heard about state of origin? All these policies are policies that are enacted and implemented and are enforced with the Biafrans as the primary target. Go to NNPC, where Nigeria's oil comes from the south, or Igbo land particularly. Because when they are telling you that the Biafra's oil is coming from the coastal regions, it's not true. They only laid pipes underground to take the oil that is in every part of Igbo land to the coastal area for easy export. And that is why they presented a picture of the fact that the oil is drilled there. It's not true. Oil is drilled from every part of Igbo land. You know Anambra State, you know Kogi, you know Enugu, you know Imo, you know Abia. Have you heard about Shell Camp in Owerri? That was where Britain, the Shell BP, started oil exploration and then oil exploitation. Shell in Owerri, that is where the College of Abaniko College of Education is situated. So any person that is telling you that it is in the coastal region that oil is found, no, the person is just trying to misdirect you, mislead you, and then misrepresent facts. So when they tell the coastal regioners that oil is from their place, now I tell you to go to that NNPC and tell me how many of the people that the oil is brought from their land that are ordinary gate men. You see the directors, you see all the executives, you see all the workers, even the gate men are all northerners. Because that is how Britain wants it to be. So that there shall not be any question about the amount of oil they steal. the much they can give to vocal and the itinerant coastal dwellers is to guide the pipeline. And that is why the Greek pig has always lost his sanity, because he wants to maintain the security, the oil pipeline megad. What am I telling you? I'm telling you about the policies that are enacted in order to continue to hold Biafrans down. And for that reason, it is a continuation of that war which they said they suspended. So I'm trying to let you know, I'm trying to let the world know that they didn't suspend that war. They only suspended the physical human genocide as at that time. And now continued the war from various fronts, especially the economic front. That is why Biafrans are not part of the federal employment structure. That is why Biafrans are not part of anything that concerns government. The little that is happening at states is just the little that they have allowed, using their puppets, who they insured, swore an allegiance to maintain even that which they had been instructed to do. So the war had long continued. Now, it is because of these stifling and strangulating conditions that prompted the need for the restoration of our nation in this our generation. Incidentally, somebody like me, I'm sorry to tell you, had always borne in mind right from my childhood that I would pursue the restoration of Biafra through legitimate means. From childhood, that was why I had always borne in mind to read law so that it would enable me to pursue that course. Incidentally and unfortunately, I ended up not reading law. But I didn't take it that the pursuit of Biafra had been jettisoned. And so when some people came making mention of Biafra, it never moved me. It never aligned with my spirit, because I never got convinced about their genuineness or whatever they were pursuing, the truthfulness in what they were doing. But I want to say that the first day that I heard the voice of our leader, Mazen Nnamdi Kanu, on somebody, in fact, that day was the day they were saying Nigeria was celebrating that they had jammed Radio Biafra. I heard about Radio Biafra by the announcement of Nigeria's government that they had jammed it. So while they were celebrating, somebody called me and asked me, have you heard about Radio Biafra? I said, I just heard about it because Nigeria is celebrating having jammed it. I said that as I'm talking to you, that Radio Biafra is talking. And so he tuned it and tuned into me and told me how to get it on my radio, and I got it. Now, while I got it and was listening to our leader, the thing was filling my body with goose pimples. Because I was saying, this is not the voice of a human being. This is not the voice of an ordinary person. I am sure that it is God that is talking through this person. Therefore, this person must be a spirit. I was telling the same to my wife when somebody called on the phone. I have shared this testimony a number of times. When somebody called on the phone and said to our leader, are you a human being or are you a spirit? So I take it that God communicated to me that he is not a human being. Even if he's in the form of a human being, that it is the Spirit of God that is talking within him. That was the same confirmation that person got. And so I got convinced that this is the person that God has brought to restore Biafra. And all my friends know that since then, we have never looked back. So, what prompted the need for the restoration of our nation, our dear nation Biafra? Now, having told you about all the economic policies that we are directed or geared towards ensuring that the Biafrans don't move any inch forward. You see that by the day, it was getting worse and worse. It was getting worse and worse. And so by divine intervention and by divine communication, God showed our leader what was planned for this time. And so he began to, God gave him a roadmap, a blueprint to counter that plan of the enemies. What do I need to tell you? It is the international community that made it a charter that self-determination is the right of every person on earth. Even if you are 200 people and you want an independent nation of your own, that nothing stops you. If you are 1 million people and you want an independent nation of your own, nothing stops you. Even there, the world swore through United Nations that they will come to your aid to assist you to come to the realization of that your dream of having your own country, whereby you live as you like with the democratic and the human rights principles, and then exercise their potentials to the fullest. But what did we receive in Nigeria? The mere mention of the fact that we want to exercise that human right, which is self-determination, they said that we have declared war. And so, with that notion, which I am sure was instigated or instilled or stipulated by Britain, Nigeria went to war against Biafrans, simply for saying that we want to have self-determination. And so, because of the fact that God had already communicated the urgent need and the approval of him, God, to use our leader to bring about the restoration of our nation this time, you find out that all that he began to say from the beginning appeared like a joke to so many people. Because he saw what others couldn't see. When he was intimating them about it, they took him as a village jester. You remember his encounter with the World Igbo Congress in USA. You remember his encounter with the Nigerians all over the places. Because they took him as a village jester. They never took him serious. And many people made mockery of him. And that was why they disregarded all that he was saying. And then he continued to build what God had given him to build. And he built it very solidly by founding the IPOB, which is the most formidable mass movement upon the face of the earth, even as we are talking. And so, God arranged it in such a way that they didn't take him serious, so that they would not interfere with what he was doing until he had been built onto a very solid base. And that is why the IPOB that you are seeing today, as he usually repeatedly says, will be the story on the lips of everybody on this earth, a world without end. And so, having built IPOB, he began to evangelize. And his evangelism opened the eyes of many. So, in the initial state of the evangelism, whereby he had gathered a few Biafrans or a number of Biafrans with which to propagate that message of Biafranism, that message of emancipation, that message of liberation, which holds the key to the liberation of the African continent and the black men all over the world. Because of the fact that Britain had known the implication of that demand, they outrightly instructed that any mention of Biafra will be met with extra brutal force, so as to ensure that everybody is frightened into not making mention of that name again. And they communicated this to the dead Buhari. And when the late Buhari got it, he ran mad. That was why everything he was doing was geared towards ensuring that our leader's life was cut short. No wonder when our leader arrived here in 2015, Buhari, through his agencies, got hold of him, thinking that by getting hold of him, that it would bring an end to the demand for Biafra. But our leader had said, even in the time of electioneering campaign, that it was Buhari that was going to win, because it was Buhari that is going to give us Biafra. I want to say that many people did not understand the context in which our leader presented that projection. But it is happening before everybody's eyes that it is Buhari's governance. It is the government of Buhari, which the Nigerian and Britain want to address this present government of impostors. They address it as Buhari government because everybody knows that Buhari died in 2017. But because of the fact that they are still operating with his name, we are, to that extent, describing the government as government of Buhari. So, our leader said that it is this government of Buhari that will give us Biafra. And people were not understanding what he was saying, because they were thinking that Buhari would one day say, okay, Biafrans, you want to go? Okay, go your way. Now, it was the ferocity and the viciousness with which Buhari, when he was alive, approached the issue of Biafra, that publicized Biafra, that advertised Biafra, that made Biafra to be the talk of the town, the talk on everybody's lips all over the world. Because by his brutality, he went beyond human boundary. He went beyond legal boundaries to inflict great pains and the genocidal massacre upon Biafrans. Take the Aba National High School matter, for example, when he sent his soldiers there, and his soldiers went and opened fire on people that were in an enclosed compound, and they shooting them to death. I am sure that nobody has forgotten the encounter Buhari had, when he was alive, with the Al Jazeera interviewer, who requested that she should replay the clip of that Aba massacre. And he said that he didn't want to see, that he didn't want to hear, he didn't want to watch. Telling you of his regrets, telling you of his pains, telling you of all that went wrong with him with that massacre. And for that news to have made it Al Jazeera, you automatically know that it's a publicity that we didn't pay for, that we paid highly for, even though indirectly. And so that one brought us to the forefront of the world. That one brought Biafran demand, Biafran agitation to the forefront of issues in the world. So I'm saying that Buhari's brutality and the viciousness and the desperation contributed greatly to the publicization of the Biafran agitation. Now, moving further from there, when our leader said that he was coming back from UK, Buhari rejoiced and said that this was the chance he was waiting for. Because he was prepared, and in fact, he did arrest our leader and incarcerated him. I am sure that the original plan was to abduct him secretly and kill him without any person knowing where he was. So while they abducted him, while they kidnapped him, while they hid him away, they were being asked about him. The DSS that abducted him from the Tulip Golden Hotel. They were being asked about him. They were denying that they were not aware of where he was, that they hadn't seen him. While they were being asked about him and they were denying, it was announced on Radio Biafra the exact location they were. Even when they took him to underground dungeon, Radio Biafra announced it. I personally may not know the means by which that they got that information. But I am sure that it's part of God's arrangement, so that there should not be any time his eyes will not be upon his servant. And so when they took him to DSS underground dungeon, Radio Biafra announced it. It was when Radio Biafra announced it that now they came out to admit that he was in their custody. And so the matter continued from there. And now my focus actually is not about the incarceration of our leader and his sham trial, from which many judges ran away. And when the heat became so much, they granted him bail without even considering the fact that they were freeing him from their chains and their captivity. Not considering that. They didn't know, because they were under divine motivation. They were under divine instruction. They were under divine prompting. So it was not in their hands to determine, because what they were doing, they knew that it was going to be so. They were only instruments in the hands of God, and that was what brought about the actualization of what God had wanted. Freeing our leader from their dungeon. So it's not part of what I am discussing. What I am actually discussing is that the brutality of Buhari, which has propagated, which has promoted, which has propelled this demand for Biafran nation. Because in their desperation, they have applied extraordinary force against Biafrans. And by the application of this extraordinary force, the effect was that many people that were against the demand for Biafra turned to be in favor of Biafra by asking, What is the offense of the people being killed? Is this just because they demanded for Biafra? Have they taken up arms? Have terrorists not been killing people over the years? What has happened to them? Has any person confronted them? Has any person fought them? Has any person even declared them as ordinary terrorists? But the people that are demanding for self-determination, you are killing them in numbers. If you see them with Biafran flag, with the Biafran link, with Biafran paraphernalia, with Biafran cap, anything that will have the colors of Biafra, it was a treason, according to Nigerian government's definition. And so, even by that reason, it was not to try them, but to extrajudicially execute them. That was what Nigerian army was sent to do. Now, all these things happened, and they have been happening because of the fact that the Biafrans have risen to the consciousness of who they are and how they must be free on their own. I want to say that at every turn of the brutality or the application of extreme force by Nigerian government, the Biafra agitation gains more converts, because even those that may not ordinarily favor the separation of Biafrans from Nigeria, they are moved and converted to the side of Biafra by reason of the application of the extreme brutal force by Nigerian government. And so you can see that even as we are talking, Nigerian government is sponsoring terrorists to come to Biafra land, invade it and massacre Biafrans after they had planted their mercenary soldiers in our bushes and forests, which our leader has mandated the ground force to eject. It has brought about the importation of mercenary fighters into Biafra land so that they will occupy our places and in due time receive the command to wipe us out. And that is, all this information was given to our leader ahead of time, and that is why he has prepared to the extent which he has prepared. Now, coming back to your question about 30th May, I just gave you an overview of who we are and a number of issues that have determined some of the things that we have done. So, coming back to 30th May, you will not forget that while the massacre of Biafrans, which Nigeria and Britain prefer to call Igbos, was going on in the north, and the Gowon that had announced himself as the head of state, with whom Ojukwu, the Eastern Regional Governor, had a meeting. It was agreed at Aburi that certain announcements will be made by the person that was in charge at Lagos, and that it will stem the tide of the massacre that was going on. And so when they came back, Gowon kept mute at the instruction or the prompting of Britain. And the massacre, the genocide, was continuing, where over 300,000 people were massacred in one day. So it was continuing. And because of the fact that the pressure was coming upon Ojukwu to do something, to save the people, if he was not, hadn't anything to do something else, to empower the people to save themselves. That was why the Federal Republic of Biafra was pronounced on the 30th May 1967. So this 30th May has come to represent Biafra's National Day so far and up to this time. And so because it's our National Day, because it's Biafra's National Day, it is always commemorated solemnly. So asking what 30th May signifies to every Biafran, every true Biafran knows that 30th May is a day of reflection. It's a day of solemnity. It's a day that is as remarkable as a day of great event, because it was the day that the modern day Biafra was bettered. And that sticks glowingly in the heart of every true Biafran. And that is why it's a special day. Why I am saying that it's a special day is that considering the number of things that happened over the years before it culminated in that genocidal war. 30th May of every year has been set aside to be the day of the commemoration of the birth of Biafra, which symbolizes the unification, which serves as a unifying force, which serves as a symbol, which serves as a citadel, which serves as a beacon of hope and courage and assurance to every Biafran. Because once 30th May is mentioned, there is no Biafran that will not flinch or stop to ask who is mentioned in 30th May, knowing the spiritual connection of Biafrans with the 30th May. So, when we are talking about 30th May, we're talking about commemorating and the planning and the effecting the strength that is reflected, the ingenuity rather, that is reflected in Biafra and Biafranism. It was from that 30th May, as the Republic was declared, that the Biafrans went to work. We didn't have any arms before Nigerian government invaded us, and shortly after invading us, they blockaded everywhere. So we were left at the mercy of the elements. But because of the fact that God has always been on our side, Biafrans went to work and invented and they manufactured, even under intense bombardment, the weapons with which they confronted the whole world. When I say the whole world, I mean the whole world, because with Russia and Britain and the Arab world and the OAU, all the African countries, on one side against the tiny Biafra, I tell you that it was Biafra against the whole world. So when we are talking about 30th May, we are remembering the day that the commencement of the manifestation of our inventive and the manufacturing ability was made manifest. The day it commenced. It was the commencement of Biafra that led Biafrans to converting passenger aeroplane to fighter aeroplane. We had none at the beginning. It was Biafran that converted the ones they captured to fighters. It was Biafran that captured some of the heavy equipment from Nigerian soldiers and converted them to theirs. It was Biafran that manufactured many of the weapons that they used to confront the world. And no one will forget the famous Ogbunigwe. Of course, you know that it was Biafran that first of all introduced the guided missile. Because we manufactured our own missiles and guided them, and in the words of our eternal leader, we guided them very far. And so we could stand at Owerri and break the Niger Bridge with our guided missile. And that was as primitive as the time was. We manufactured all that we needed by ourselves. And so this thing marveled the international world. Remember that at a time when Biafrans went to Belgium for assistance, the Belgian government said to Moked, our Chief Justice, that we don't want to risk the establishment of another Japan in Africa. And that is why we cannot be of help to you. We don't want to risk another Japan in Africa. So they knew us, because they knew that within such a time we were able to accomplish so much. If we had any assistance, we could overtake Europe. And that was their fear. That is still their fear up to now. And that is why they are doing everything they are doing to ensure that Biafra is not established. But unfortunately for them, because God has decreed, determined, established, and confirmed that this is the time for Biafra to be restored, there is nothing any human being can do about that. The world can testify that despite all that Britain has done, despite all that Nigeria has done, the Biafran restoration project is still spreading like the Hamatan fire that is as unquenchable as any other unquenchable thing. So that 30th May is very memorable to every Biafran because it was the commencement of the day, it was commencement of the establishment or advertisement or exploration of the Biafran ingenuity. And now, you also know that even in the present time, that Britain, through Nigeria, is still living another war of genocide on us as we are talking. we find out that this 30th May is a rallying point because it refreshes the mind of every Biafran about the predicament, about the danger, about the precarious situation that we have found ourselves. I ask you again, if Britain could exit, could go away from the European Union that is homogeneous, that is democratic, that is capitalist, and that has the same value system, if Britain can go away from there, why is Britain insisting that Biafrans that are at cross purposes with every other section of the country should remain as one? No wonder the British, the American ambassador is promoting multiculturalism. But we know that that multiculturalism is being promoted in hypocrisy. It's being promoted as a result of greed. It's being promoted as a result of gluttonness, or gluttony rather, because they have been settled, they have been bribed, they have been given money. That is why they close their eyes to all the evils that the Nigerian government is doing against the Biafrans. Otherwise, why will Biafrans be victims of air bombardment by the Nigerian government, and the American government, represented by the US mission in Nigeria, will not utter a word? So it tells you clearly, openly, boldly, and unequivocally. Now, you ask yourself, why will it be that Fulanis will invade parts of Biafra and massacre people, and all that will concern the government and the so-called diplomats is the number of victims, the number of casualties, whether it is 200 or whether it's 300. No, it is not true that it's 300. It is only 250. Even if it was one person. Why will it be that America will keep quiet about that? American ambassador will keep mute about that. British ambassador that even sent the terrorists to go to commit the murder will keep quiet about that. But simply because the UN facility in Borno State, Damascus or what, has been affected. Now, the US has found her voice. The US ambassador has found her voice. The UK in Nigeria, Kathleen Aliang, has found her voice to condemn the attack because the property of the UN was affected. We are not saying that anyone should be affected in the first place, but we're only making comparison or reference to the fact that 200 people could be killed, 300 people could be killed. You can't hear them. But because of the fact that property was damaged, now they have all come to condemn terrorism. So you can see that it is a deliberate scheme, in fact, an international conspiracy to ensure that Biafra is not restored, because they know that the restoration of Biafra would mean truncating or taking away their criminal sustenance from them. You know that we tell the truth to the world because we promise that we are going to destroy Nigeria with the truth. So if you put that in the context of 30th May, you will see that it is a date that is very dear to the heart of every Biafran, because it is a date that signifies the realization or the re-establishment of our identity, and a date that reinforces the need for us to work harder in order to ensure that our nation, our dear nation Biafra, is restored in our time. Thank you very much.